Right. This is important for this, is it? The camera? And you're tied into the room. All right. Okay. You'd make an introduction? Oh, good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Synergy session we have today on European Union's Northern Periphery and Arctic program. And I think you might speak about the ERNECT as well.
Just a short introduction.
Short introduction, perfect. We have someone's been asking about Wi-Fi connection. I just wanted to get that out of the way first. You can connect here. It's the Alliant hotspot, and there's no password required for that. We've got about a 25-minute presentation-ish,
Yeah,
and then we'll open the floor to Q&As. We've got an hour and a half, so there's lots of time to get your questions in. We are webcasting the session today. So we will open the floor. When we open the floor to questions, people can email in their questions online. They can email harriscenter@mun.ca. Before we get started, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we are gathered as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and the Natuhavut and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation in honor of this beautiful land together. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you the speaker, Colm McColgan. He's the general manager of the European ERNECT network. We are very fortunate that Colin is in the province today as part of the LearnTech Forum, and I think lots of people in the room are also here because of that. And he was asked by the NAP program to come and share his experiences in developing and delivering the Northern Periphery and Arctic projects and provide some practical guidance to interested organizations. So it's my pleasure to pass it over to Colin.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Again. So today I'll give a very short introduction to ERNECT that I work for, but most of this afternoon we'll be talking about the Northern Periphery and Arctic program, which is a European Union program. So just I work for ERNECT, and ERNECT is it's a network of European regions and cities that work together, focused on the topic of information technology, or nowadays digital transformation. And there's 10 core partners in that network, including the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. It's our newest member and the first outside Europe, and we're very proud of that. And over the last week, since we came here on Sunday, we've been talking to a lot of people and organizations on the ground, and a lot of interest in what we're doing, and a lot of interest in connecting with Europe. So that is very prestigious for the time going forward. We do also work with, there's 10 European regions, 10 regions and cities that manage the network. The office is in Ireland, in Donegal. But we do work with lots of other regions and cities pretty much throughout Europe. And our job really in the office is to take the ideas and the priorities of the different regions and to develop those into bids, which can be put forward to Brussels, which is our Ottawa, for funding for various projects. It could be around apps for tourists. It could be, they could be interested in innovation systems or innovation parks around the digital, and they may want to do something on that. And you know, just in Europe, the digital transformation agenda has very much come to the fore. There's all kinds of initiatives from smart cities to industry 4.0 or factory 4.0 and smart villages, and lots of the research funding has been diverted into digital transformation as well, and there's going to be a number of new programs coming up in the future. This is just a flavor of some of the projects in which we're currently working. We manage these projects on behalf of the regions from our office, and it could be it's about digital technology, but it could be in energy, it could be in digital cities or smart cities, or you know, even trying to get the ICT or tech sector to work better with more traditional sectors. Just a little bit about the background of Newfoundland and Labrador's background or involvement in the network. There was a feasibility study carried out about 2014. It was actually led by the Harris Centre here, in collaborate, and also the ACOA put some money into that, as well as the province, and ERNET put some funding into that as well. The work was actually carried out by Pat Curran, who's, I'm sure a lot of you know him. He's in the room there, and as a result of that, the province decided to join the network. Of course, you know, since that time, then we've had the implementation of CETA, the signing up of CETA last year, which should give a good boost to our work together between Newfoundland and Europe. And of course, the Arctic is a hot topic now for everybody. Also, the Atlantic. You have an Atlantic strategy here, but there's also an Atlantic strategy on the European side as well. And there's a lot of similarities and a lot of opportunities to work together. Lastly, I would just say, you know, that the European Union, for its next period, starting 2021, has plans to become more of a global player in terms of free trade and development. They're going to do a lot of work in Africa, long-term strategic plans. So I think that kind of background, you know, provides a very interesting landscape for us going forward to help our work. So I think that's, you know, that's the general part of the introduction. Really, what I'm mainly here today is to talk about the Northern Periphery and Arctic program, and that's in Europe. It's quite a big place with over 600 million people. What they tend to do is they tend to divide it up into smaller, manageable chunks. And the Northern Periphery and Arctic program, it's I suppose fundamentally it's about territorial cohesion. We have this concept in Europe, you know, that because it's made up of different countries, then a lot of effort has got to go into drawing those countries together to do things together, and also that they will over time, you know, do things in solidarity. It's a big part of the ethos of the European Union. The Northern Periphery and Arctic program is part of that policy. It also is got a geographical axis, as you would call it. You know, where different geographical parts of Europe are at different stages of development, and we're trying to equalize that over the long term. And then it's very much related to innovation as well, and on to research, but very much about, you know, that European regions now need to figure out what their strengths are and line up their research and innovation policies behind that. So that's really, you know, the context of the Northern Periphery and Arctic program, and this program. It mainly focused on those dark green areas there, which are inside the European Union. but it also works with Norway, which, as you know, is in Europe, but it's outside the European Union, and also Iceland and Greenland. And they have, not on this map, but on the other maps, they state their intention to work with other parts that are nearby. And one of the places specifically mentioned is Atlantic Canada. And that's because of the North Atlantic and because of the Arctic. And this particular program that I'm explaining to you now has been running for the last number of years, and there are some partners from Atlantic Canada participating. There's a new program starting in 2021, and it is the intention of the Northern Periphery and Arctic management of the program to have a stronger involvement. So I think this is a very timely time for us to be here talking about it. Before I came here, I had some meetings with the Northern Periphery and Arctic management, and their idea is that if there's good interest here in Newfoundland and Labrador, that they will engage directly with you here, probably through the provincial government. So when I go back, I'm going to make a report, and I'll put them in contact with the province, and hopefully good things will come from that. And what we've done to date this week, I think, has really helped that. We had a project ideas workshop on Wednesday evening, and there was out of that was a very dynamic discussion, and within the space of less than an hour, we had come up with 5 project ideas, which we'll be feeding back to them as well. There's the Arctic, as you probably can imagine, living here, it's really is a very important part of Europe's policy now, and they have given responsibility for developing relationships with other parts of the world on the Arctic to the Northern Periphery and Arctic program, and that's because they have Europe's Arctic areas within their geographic boundaries. So you can imagine this particular program. It's Europe, when they do things, I'm sure it's like other big places. They apply certain approaches or methods or methodologies, and very much what they do is they analyze the strengths and weaknesses, challenges, opportunities of a particular geographic area, and then after that they would have focus, what we call from a policy point of view, focused intervention, and they're very much into this focus. Was up until about 5 years ago, it was much more kind of a scattergun approach, and they like to see tangible projects and results coming out. If there's a project that's something to do with, for example, looking at new forms of nets to be used in the fishing industry, they like to do pilots, and they like to see that becomes sustainable. So that's from a kind of policy point of view. The challenges that geographic area have are pretty much similar to what's here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm sure you can recognize all of those bullet points. So I'm not going to dwell on that. So before the program started, they would have analyzed the strengths and weaknesses. They would have identified the challenges, and then through a process of consultation with the countries and the areas that are in the Northern Periphery, they would have developed a vision statement, and it's about sustainable communities, harnessing innovation, entrepreneurship, and seizing the unique opportunities that are in the northern and Arctic and subarctic zones, maybe around natural resources and things like timber and the opportunity for energy and the capacity for innovation and entrepreneurship around those areas that can create the products and services of the future that can be useful for other parts of Europe and for creating jobs. I would imagine, having been here for a week, this is the kind of vision that would be of interest here. What they did then was, having got through all that part of the high level part of the program, then they started to put it into different sections and what they call axes. And so this is a diagram. I would imagine it's pretty difficult to read there. So there's four main axes in it. One is innovation. Second one is entrepreneurship. Then one around energy secure communities, and that's really about low carbon energy generation, hydro, and then also energy efficiency. And then the last axis, the fourth one, is really about protecting and enhancing both our natural and cultural heritage. So that's so this program it's a funding program. So what happens then is that they invite every now and again, every 6 months or 9 months, they will have what's called a call for proposals, and I would imagine you're similar with that type of way of working. And so once they have a call out, different regions in the northern parts of Europe would get together, and this could be a university, it could be the city authority, it could be a county council or a local community or non-profit. They would get together and using whatever means they have, they would be in touch with other parts of the northern periphery. And the idea is to put together a project around a particular topic, and it would fit into one of these four headings: innovation, entrepreneurship, etc. The key thing for it is that you have to put partners from different countries together. So it's no good having all Irish ones or all Newfoundland people. You have to have people from Norway and Finland as well. And just this, if we take the innovation axis or pillar, this is a kind of this could be the type of topics that they would be interested in. Maybe clustering small companies that have the same needs. How do you bring research and development to remote areas, to companies that are operating in remote areas? Could be about business networks as well, for example. There's a big focus on the creative sector, and also involving marginalized groups or indigenous peoples in this whole process as well. There's a very big focus on that. Entrepreneurship, specifically mention encouraging entrepreneurship among young women, taking place-based opportunities and trying to package that and sell it. And we would have, in the session we had the other night, there would have been a lot of discussion about that and a lot of project ideas around that. And then, if you're a company in a small area or group of companies, how do you access markets, especially if you live far away, like say in Brian Burke's case, like Nunavut, for example. That would be an example of the type of projects. So essentially, what happens is, that by whatever means possible, you try to get in touch with like-minded people in other parts of the northern periphery, and typically you would design a 3-year project involving could be 6 or 7 different partners. You could cover maybe say four countries. I think the minimum is 3, but you could cover 4 countries, and you could have 1 or 2 partners from from each country, say. So that could be, say, your university and your city council. It could be an organization like the Legendary Coast, working with the university or the Chamber of Commerce or whatever. It depends on the needs. And so over the 3 years, typically what happens in the first 6 months is the project is set up. You get to know the people better. You tie things down. and then you go through a period where you're showing other partners in the project what you have here, for example, and they're showing you what they have. I'll give some examples towards the end here. And then, having gone through that kind of exchange of knowledge or technology kind of exchange, you then sit down to the business of deciding, well, this is definitely, this is what I would like to do in my region or my province. So, so then I suppose most of the money in the project would go then to piloting a solution in your area. So if we use the legendary coast area and that part south of here, it might be a way of how better to get tourists into there, and what kind of good products do you have, and how do you sell those, and how do you get them to move about. So that solution in the ideal world would be based on something that you have seen in the other partner regions. And they would be taking approaches that you've had and trying them out. And that's one of the interesting things about Newfoundland and Labrador is the fact that it's outside Europe, so you're in the North American continent. So in terms of approaches and business culture and development culture, it's slightly different. So that's very interesting for innovation and entrepreneurship. So I'm going to finish off here with just giving some example projects. And these are not projects in which I've been involved. They're ones that have been showcased by the Northern Periphery and Arctic program. So in these waters we have sea urchins, and it's in the innovation pillar. And how can you use that resource in a sustainable way, but which can create jobs and bring people to an area. And this would be the kind of objectives for the project over the 3-year period. So you can see there's a period here where you go through trying to identify what are the optimal fishing techniques in the urchin domain. And then, obviously this is tied up with things like the management of fisheries and also the legislation, which can be different in the different countries and regions. So that's something that's important. And then in the case of this project, transferring knowledge on how to enhance roe, which is something that I know absolutely nothing about, but I'm sure there's people in the room who are great experts on that. And then how do you go about selling it and getting it to customers? So that would be a project, a typical project that would have lasted for 3 years. The MPA, they do like you to be kind of specific as well. So this is quite specific. It's focusing on the urchin domain. If you submit a project to them which is very wide, and you kind of say, well, what is this going to achieve, or it's all over the place, so they like you to focus. This one here is I suppose very topical subject at the moment. It's around marine plastic waste. So somebody, I'm not sure who it was. I think it might have been in Sweden. I can't remember, but they had an idea about harvesting, put that in inverted commas, this plastic waste, and using that to develop a business opportunities. And because it was such a new thing, they thought it was important that that you had to showcase it and maybe acclimatize and educate people on this, because it's a new thing, so they wanted to do showcases so people could see it, and to provide a support system for that, and then to connect remote communities to the wider, I suppose, business network. Because if you started recycling this and selling it, then you had to connect in with existing, I suppose, waste distribution channels, etc. So that's just examples. There's many more, and Northern Periphery website, which I don't think I've put up here, but you can find it very easily. Have got many more examples. So I didn't want to present too long. I hope I've given you an overview of how it works. And I know I know from experience and talking to groups, especially from outside Europe, that it's maybe difficult to take it all in at the one time about how it works. But the fact that the province is part of the network, and we're here to help. We have a lot of experience in this. We can also help if there are project ideas. We can also help you to find partners in the other countries, because we know lots of people around those places and they participate. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Colin. You can stay put, though. We're not done with you yet.
Thank you very much.
Now is the opportunity we can open the floor to questions. And if there's anyone watching online, you can also submit your questions. Colin's given us lots to think about. It seems to be an endless opportunity. So I'm sure that there are lots of questions. Or you're all too tired. Did you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. There you go, Colin.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, Colin. And it's a lot of great information for people in the room who have, this is the first time we're hearing about this actual fund. I guess what I'm asking is, once we go down this process, and I know the EarnAct is there. Is there some kind of assistance in developing proposals, developing, I guess, projects?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because the program has a template that you have to use. Everybody has to use the one template, and I can't remember everything that's on it, but it's got what you would expect. It would ask you, all of your partners and what the capacities of those partners and why are they interested in this project. You would have to outline your approach, your aim, objectives. You would also have to do a 3-year work plan and a budget by partner and that. So they do host what they call project development sessions.
Okay.
And there are people about as well who know a lot about this, because they've been involved for years. And in EarnAct, we would have good experience in this area. We've got 2 or 3 project leaders. So we would be, in the case of NFL, we would be, quite willing to assist with that process.
And of course, we'd have resources here in terms of the Harris Center and the university. We have great resources here. So thank you very much.
Like the people that you have here would be quite familiar with the approach, so.
Oh, she had you go ahead. Can you introduce yourself too, please?
Yes, I'm Erica Rashad. I'm a professor in the chemistry department. I had a question in terms of the orientation of the goals. You mentioned energy sector, and you mentioned natural resources. In terms of what was the phrase you used? The energy secure communities. Is there a position that really favors hydroelectric, or is there a support for distributed rather than large infrastructure distributed projects, or, for example, small hydroelectric local producers?
Yeah. The Northern Periphery geographically is pretty much like here. You've got big distances and small communities, and they're extremely excited by the opportunities of new models of generating electricity and energy. And I've heard of cases where they use wood energy and hydro energy and, I suppose, wave energy in certain places for generation. and that would serve a small geographic area. So they're very much into that type of solutions. Yeah.
Hey, I think we got one more question there, and she's already holding the mic. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Katie Gillespie. I'm a student at Memorial and part of Enactus Memorial, the student group. I was just curious, we had the 4 pillars up there for the plan from 2014 to 2020, but a lot of the proposals will probably be going forward are for 2021. Are those 4 pillars going to stay the same, or do you think they could be tweaked?
It's difficult to know that at this stage. There hasn't been a lot of, we're only at the beginning of the process now where they start looking at the new program. And one of the things they feel they have to do first in order to get a feel for what size the program could be is they've got to get the overall European Union budget agreed. And the plan is that will be agreed in May of next year. And then after that, then everybody will start sitting down seriously and looking at this program and other programs as well. I suppose because of the topics, we would expect it to be fairly similar, although that's not can't take that as 100% certain. But certainly the topics will be the same. They may package it up in a different way, you know. So I think the thing is to watch this space now over the next few 6 to 9 months. We should have a clear idea. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm Andrew Ward. I just want to say that if there was...
Sorry, can you introduce yourself as well?
Sorry, Andrew Ward and Newfoundland Development Partnership. I manage a program called the Leader Program, and Porrick here manages another one. Now, if there were projects that were, you know, maybe ready to start next year, or maybe if there was something to get up and run that could lead into something like this, you know, we in order for us to work with Newfoundland, we would have to speak, because it's outside the EU, we have to get permission from our department. I've already contacted the department, and now I hoped to get an answer back before I came here, but the soundings were definitely positive. So in the region of, you know, if there was a small project, now we would be able to do cultural things, we'd be able to do environmental stuff, you know, it's a fairly wide-ranging thing. We would need to be partnering with a similar body, so we would probably have to speak to someone in government in Newfoundland. But for comparatively small money, up to 150,000, I would say, if there was a project there, we'd, you know, if there was something that we wanted a quick win, let's put it that way, I think it'd be worth exploring.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, we talked earlier there about, you know, how do you develop these projects, and they do take a lot of interaction and collaboration to do it. So something like that could be a mechanism that would allow us to do that.
If I may ask a question, Porrick Fingleton, Donegal Local Development. Just rates of aid, Colin, broadly speaking, what are the rates of aid that this fund will pay? And the second question is the minimum number of partners. I mean, we're talking about ourselves and our colleagues here today, but is there a minimum number of partners needed for a project?
Yeah, well, what I understand is the minimum number of countries that can be involved, that have to be involved in an MPA project is 3. So definitely you have to have a minimum of 3 partners. But you can have, you know, within the 3 countries, you could have 5 partners. Typically projects are bigger than that. They're usually 4 countries, maybe with a minimum of 6 partners. They don't like it to get too big either. You know, if it's too big, they feel that that's a different type of project and not conducive to doing pilots within the different places. So I've seen some projects go up to maybe 10 or 11 partners, but that doesn't tend to be the norm. In terms of the funding, this time round, the way it has worked is that the rate of funding has been 65% for European Union partners. And in the case of Atlantic Canada partners, it's 50%. Now, the type of headings that, that there's standard headings that you would use when you're developing the budget. So it's around staff, office costs, external expertise, piloting, a budget for piloting, and then there's a travel budget. What most people, most organizations participating, not all of them, but most of them seem to be in a position where they can use existing staff. So that really helps a lot, if it's quite close to your organization's goals and mission. So that's the 65% and 50%. Now that could change with the new program. We don't know that yet.
I think there we get question. Pat.
Good afternoon, Pat Curran. Colin, a couple of questions, perhaps. Any Atlantic Canadian projects to date that you can speak of? Any uptake there? And I guess the other question I had is, the Harris Centre maintains a thing called YAFL, which is essentially a portal that allows people to express interest around research projects and activities. And is there an equivalent within MPA where, a potential partner in Europe could place a sort of a mini project description and try to identify and link up networks around partnership and project development? So two questions for one. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to deal with the last part first, because it's the Northern Periphery website has a part of the website contains a description of all the existing projects, and they've organized it under various themes, and you can search there, find out all the partners and etc. They also have a service. They call it a service, where if you have a project idea, you can post it. You can post it up on that website as well, and it's emailed or through a newsletter. I can't remember which. It goes to other people who have signed up for that. So that'll go all over the MPA area, and that's been pretty useful for people. In terms of existing organizations, I don't know all of the people, but I do know that there's a project in Halifax. There's an organization there called the Ecology Action Centre. So they're very much into sustainability and energy efficiency and other things as well. And about 4 years ago, they became involved in an AirNet project. This was before the province would have signed up. And it was actually through that mechanism they saw a project idea that we had up there. The particular project is called the Secure Project. It's mentioned on the brochure. And that's a project which is about in the public sector about improving energy efficiency within public buildings or public infrastructure, and it could be simple things like, with public lighting, using LED lights instead of the older ones. So they've been in that project for the last it's finished now actually. So they were in it for 3 years. They had some very interesting approaches which they brought to the European partners, and I can't remember exactly what they did with their pilot here, but I know that in every country which was in that project, they selected like an energy community. So they focused on a small area that had some public buildings and maybe some public or social housing, we call it. And they would have improved the energy efficiency there, and they'd have done a lot of education and dissemination, and they would have tried out maybe systems. Like, I suppose in Europe, the people, the Finnish and the Swedish would be pretty much ahead in terms of energy efficiency because of their climate. We would have. I know that some of those approaches would have been transferred to Ireland. What I do remember about the Ecology Action Centre was they were very good at getting their message out and very good at engaging with communities. And I think that's the main thing that they brought to the European people, because in Europe it tends to go through the local authority, the provincial authority, whereas this was a non-profit which took a much more independent view. And I think it was that kind of approach that people on the other side learned the most from.
We got one question right here, and then there's another lady. Oh, you're okay now? Okay.
Brian First, the Harris Center. Just a clarification and a question regarding YAFO. There is actually nothing to prevent partners from outside Newfoundland and Labrador to enter a partnership opportunity. We would treat it just like any other opportunity and try to broker the relationship with appropriate groups or faculty at Memorial. The other thing is there are many projects already in YAFO, so if somebody is looking for a partner, they might actually find one. My question is, at what point would you like to see a potential partnership approach NPA? For example, we just funded a project on a pilot project on sea urchin aquaculture in Bayverde Peninsula. So that pilot will be done in maybe a year or so. Would that be appropriate time for them, for example, to approach for the next steps, or would you like them to approach partnership right from the beginning?
Yeah. Well, from a programming point of view, we're reaching the end of one funding program, so the funding will stop. Then there'll be this bit of a hiatus where they get the new one up and running. So it will be 2021 when they get it running. Now, in my experience, the Northern Periphery people are, they're very efficient. They're run by Scandinavians and they're super efficient compared to the rest of us. So they'll probably get it up. They'll probably get it up fairly quickly. So if your project finishes, yeah. But at the same time, like if you were interested in that sea urchin project, it might be an idea now to make contact with them and start exploring things, because to make a good project you need time. Yeah.
We've got two questions in the back, and yep, Justin, you can get the mic to that guy right there. Yeah, right next to him.
Rocky Taylor from the Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science here at Memorial. Thanks very much for a very interesting presentation. I'm just curious about some of the details of the funding mechanisms. You mentioned that up to 50% of costs could be covered for Atlantic Canadian partners. So I guess obviously the balance of that would have to come from contribution from the Canadian partner. And I'm just curious around, can that come from any source? Like, is it private sector? Does it have to be private sector? Can it be public sector? Or, for example, could it be public funds that could come through the university partner, and then the other 50% could go to cover costs for engagement with our private sector partners? I'm just curious as to if there are stipulations around the sources of funding. Yeah.
As far as I remember, they don't really mind where it comes from. But they like you to say, is it coming from the private sector? They like you to indicate what percentage is coming from the private sector, how much is coming from the universities. I think there's three, from memory, I think there's three different categories, but they don't really mind that. And as I said earlier as well, if you can use existing staff, if it's close to what they're doing, then that's, I suppose that's an in-kind contribution. And I know from listening to people and experience that's a very important part of it, because the staff costs tend to be the main part of the project. Yeah.
I think we had one other question I missed in the middle. You see, we're all in sync today.
I guess I was also wondering if you could please comment on sort of maybe the scope and scale of a typical project. Are they 100,000, or 1 million, 5 million? What sort of scope would you expect as reasonable?
Yeah, the total project, for if you count all of the regions, it could be 3 million Canadian dollars. That would be on the highest side. And some projects go down to about half of that. And then what you do find within the project is in allowing for different costs in different regions and staffing. They tend to be pretty similar, you know. And the reason being that you know, because you have to implement a pilot, then there is a bit of investment, you know. We do find as well that some regions, they might bring in a particular university, because, for example, because they have a particular expertise and they can advise, you know, the entire project. So you could have up to, you know, I don't know, 400,000 could be a typical budget over 3 years for one of the partners in the project.
Mr. Slade, the mic is right behind you.
Gordon Slade with the Shorefast Foundation of Fogo Island. A question about governments. I assume you don't need to involve the governments in this program. Like the partner can emerge in Newfoundland, but they don't have to go through any jurisdictional or regulatory process.
No.
That's good.
I say no. I see Gillian Skinner is behind you there. So they're the actual partner in the project. So I would imagine that's you know, you see in Europe it's certainly, you know, I mentioned that we have, in theory you don't have to do that. Like, you can go and form partnerships. In the case of AirNect, because we have 10 partner regions, we tend to take we have to take our priorities and our steers from the partner in that region. So in the case of here, we would go through, obviously, the province. So, but the program itself doesn't insist on that. It's the only reason we do that is so that priorities are maintained. Yeah. I don't know, do you want to say anything?
You can take this mic. The other one's on the other side of the room. Here you go.
Hi, I also have a question, Colin, about one thing we haven't quite talked about yet. So Gillian Skinner, Department of Tourism, Culture, Industry and Innovation. So to Gordon's point, we are a member of EarnAct, and then Colin, I don't know if you touched on kind of it was more about the NPA. So through the EarnAct process, as Colin mentions, that is where regions actually vote on the projects, because there's only so many that can be delivered on by EarnAct. So we're kind of in the process of looking at, and that's part of why we were really interested that Colin was able to come this week and have discussions to see where we could see some strong opportunities in partnership and potentially develop some projects. Similar to what Colin said, there would have to be some prioritization of, because you won't be able to get 10 projects through the network just from Newfoundland and Labrador. I mean, I think that's fairly that's fair comment. And that's just, I'm just kind of new to the network, so I'm starting to get a better understanding of how it works. But I think, you know, through the MPA, as Colin mentioned, he's here today to present this program, and if there's interest in some opportunities, I think it'll be interesting to see how the organization for MPA feels about coming back to talk to the province and perhaps expand on what the opportunity may be for our jurisdiction. And just on that, Colin, further to Katie's point earlier about the pillars and the priorities, one thing, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, but how are they deciding the pillars into 2021 and 2027? Because as Colin mentioned, the projects have to be very well fleshed out. It takes time. That's one thing I've noticed. You talk about government processes and taking time to review projects. When you're talking about multiple jurisdictions and a 3-year project and of that nature, that is certainly a time process. So moving into 2021, how are they determining those pillars? I mean, I think they're fairly safe to say innovation, entrepreneurship, and culture and natural assets are likely, they're all the pillars of discussion on sustainability. So I suspect they would be very common. But do they have a process of how they're updating it, or is it strictly within their jurisdictions?
No, they go through a pretty open process to decide on the pillars that you end up with, and also on the weight, the amount of money that they allocate to the 4 pillars. I think innovation, for example, I think they got about 30% the last time of the total. Entrepreneurship maybe 25, and then so they did that. So I understand, like the one of the things the first things they do is they do an evaluation of the previous program. So they'll be starting now to look at how this program has. They also, I know that in each of the member states, each of the countries in the MPA, they set up a group and they consult with those about how they see things. They would also obviously consult with Brussels and the wider policies of the European Union. I understand they do some surveys as well at a lower level with each country, and in terms of Atlantic Canada, I think the last time that they consulted with people in Ottawa, but I know that they're very keen to get down to the provincial level, and they have said, if we can demonstrate good demand here, that they're willing to come and talk to the province about that, and that's only a good thing, because it means that your priorities will get a better place, a better rank, I suppose, is one way of putting it in the overall scheme of things.
One more question over there.
Colin, the current programs, 2014 to 20, is there funding still in that program? Or what is your thinking with, I suppose, the amount of time it does take to pull an application together at this stage? If we had an interest, would we be really looking at the new program, which starts in 2021?
Well, in most cases, yeah. There is a call which closes at the end of November. So everybody's developing their projects for that now. And in our case, we're developing a project around energy efficiency in city neighborhoods, sort of applying smart city type approaches to energy efficiency in neighborhoods. And of course, we're very interested to have a partner from Newfoundland and Labrador in that, and we've talked to some of the cities here about that. The other thing is, before I came, they have a mechanism which they call a preparation project, and again they said, if there was good demand here and subject to discussion with the province, that they would look at maybe sooner rather than later, rather than waiting for the new program. They may fund a project which allows us to look at maybe the ideas that we've discussed in the last week at a deeper level. It gives money for traveling and developing work plans and that type of thing. Now that's that subject that has to go through all the usual. It's a competitive process, so you have to have a good quality bid. But if I'd say the discussions with the province would have to take place first before we could look at that. But it certainly is something which I understand is there, which pretty good opportunity for us.
Got one question down there.
Hi, my name is Maeve Shoiga. I'm from a development agency in the Gaelic-speaking regions of Ireland, so obviously all along the remote west coasts. And we've spent the last 5 days with DMOs, so destination marketing organisations in the regions. We've got to meet them, and also with people in business in the private sector, which has been great. So there's plenty of ideas. But I'm wondering, where does that, to be partners, are you looking, is it government, is it sort of state agencies and official kind of organizations, or do private companies tend to be partners, or do they become partners under a bigger group? How would private sector, because at the end of the day it's about for me, everything's about creating jobs. So
yeah,
who are going to create the jobs? Only the people in business. So how do they feed into the whole story?
Yeah.
Okay,
the governments and different levels of government and universities and research centers, and those people are, they participate heavily in the program. What you also see as well, you would see lots of like chambers of commerce or organizations that are cluster organizations that are representative of the private sector participating. Now, private sector companies can participate in the program for the last few years. There haven't been too many of them, and the reason is because it's extremely onerous on the project, and there's this whole question of trying to. We have this big thing in Europe. I think you have it here. It's probably, I don't know if you call it antitrust here. We call it state aids in Europe, where a company can't get an unfair advantage, in terms of a public contract and in this case, if they were in this project, would that give them unfair advantage? And they can participate. Very complex rules, which I wouldn't even try to remember now, but I can find them out if you're interested. So that mechanism is there, but there's rules like if they participate as a private company, then they can't benefit from the project. Now, non-profit companies can participate. Non-profits. I don't know what other kind of legal, anything that has Pat Curran might be good at this kind of stuff, kind of a non-private for-profit type of organizations can all participate. It's wide open like that. Naive. And others can participate, as you know.
Okay, we have one question up here, and then you had one right there. You go.
Kathy Stacey, I'm with Legendary Coast, the destination management organization for Eastern Newfoundland. Just one question, I guess, if you can, off the top of your head, give us an example of where there's a project around the preservation, protection of our cultural and natural heritage, but also something that involves tourism as an economic driver for the sustainability of coastal communities.
Right.
Maybe just a small example or whatever, but I'm just wondering if there are any projects that are ongoing at the moment or have been.
Yeah. So off the top of my head, Kathy, I can't remember an existing project, but there was a project a few years ago in which we were involved, and it was around hiking trails, and it involved Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and in that particular project, because it was us, it was built around information technology. So it was developing apps in each of the region around hiking trails, and there were some very interesting things. Like in Finland, the part of Finland that was involved, it's called North Karelia. It's right up against the Russian border. And they fought the Russians during the Second World War up there. So that all happened in their forests. So they had you could download an app onto, if you were a tourist, down onto your phone, and you could go on this trail in the forest. And when you reached a certain point, then it would kind of jump up at you and it would tell you about what happened there. And there was some video and that type of thing. So that's an example, and the others did pretty much similar things. From memory, the people in Iceland, they augmented it with augmented reality, over what you were looking at and the trail and all this kind of stuff. So it was, but that would be there are other examples, of not so much techie type ones, but taking packaging culture and, just from memory during the week, like kind of stuff around, like Bonavista, where all the houses were renovated and that, yeah, they love that kind of stuff, and how do you market that then, and how do you, and the bit about, building up the skills of the carpenters, and that's, new opportunities for traditional skills is something that's very important.
You can go ahead.
So very much on that, is there a database or a space where you can sort of look through previous projects that were funded, ongoing or finished? Because obviously a lot of the regions have similar issues and some of them have developed programs through funding to solve some of those issues. So is there a resource that for for those of us interested in looking at different projects and finding solutions, that we could sort of have a look and see some groups or organizations that have already been working on similar things in Iceland and Norway. And
yeah, well, sort of like ongoing and completed projects, you would be, yeah, certainly the projects from 2012, I think, are on the MPA website. Also, I think the previous program is up there somewhere as well, but I'll send that on. I'll send you the links maybe, so you can have a look through that. And it's a good point, because anytime we're doing a new project proposal, we always look to see if it's been funded already, because they don't like to do things that are very similar. If it's been done somewhere, they don't like to do it, so you have to try and avoid that. So I'll send on the links.
We've got time for a couple more questions, if there are any.
I can safely say that I've never answered so many questions in my life.
You've held them quite well. Oh, one more.
Is this on? Oh,
yes.
I used to be involved in writing these, and come back to the projects. When you go on the database, you'll see a lot of the projects are the same. And I used to go and ask the project officers about it. And the reason why a lot of the projects go through is there's a question on the form called transnational learning. And you have to prove in less than a page how the partnership is going to work together. And it is the hardest question to answer, is how is Newfoundland going to learn from Ireland, and how is Ireland going to learn from Newfoundland and transfer that to Portugal or whatever is on the, and that is the hardest part of the question, because everybody knows what they want to do, but they're funding us to work together. And that is the key strength of ERNACT, because I've been to Finland with ERNACT and they're superb at it, but it is the very hardest question. How will Newfoundland learn from Ireland, and vice versa? And that's where everybody kind of scratches their head and says, don't know. Yeah. So that's why, but this the purpose of this kind of getting together is we get to know each other's strengths, weaknesses, and then when you write it into a form, it has to come out as an objective. Yeah, and that's the real hard bit. Yeah.
So it's all about the strength of working together then, and that seems like a good note.
Yeah, and the point that Paul has made is a genuine one, and it is a difficult one, but at the same time, if you're working with the right partners and the kind of the domain areas and the areas are compatible, then it can be pretty obvious. It's describing that in the right way. And that is, you know, if they don't think there's going to be learning between the different places, then they say, well, this project is not feasible, you know, from their perspective.
Any final questions for the day? Oh.
I was just wondering if, so the program is, I guess, more themed around building partnerships and learning and so forth, but I guess sometimes there might be joint infrastructure, for example. Are there other programs outside of this particular program that may help, you know, around more infrastructure, for example, research infrastructure or otherwise, to facilitate, you know, broader collaboration?
Yeah. This particular program it's not into research, and it's actually not into education either. It's if there's a university involved, they want the university to be there very much in terms of its, you know, its work with communities or work with industry, you know, that kind of support. Now there is a certain amount of pilot infrastructure allowed to trial new solutions, but it's not on a big scale. Now, I suppose it's not an infrastructure program. You know, it's not about building big infrastructure. It's not even, you know, putting down fiber optic cables or building roads or this kind of. It's not really into that. Now, in terms, obviously, you know, there are other European programs. You know, mentioned the Horizon 2020 program, which I spoke to Kelly about this morning from the Marine Institute. And there are ways to connect that up with the Canadian research programs. Is that, yeah?
Any other takers? All right, it looks like we're out of questions for now, although I don't think you're rushing out of the room. So I'm sure if anyone had any follow-up questions for Colm, he'd be more than happy to answer them after the session. I take a second. Thanks to all of you for coming out, and thank you to Colm. Thanks also to Don, who helped set it all up. I don't know if he's in the room. I haven't met him yet, so I only emailed him. And thanks to the Harris Center team for putting today together. As I mentioned earlier, the session today was webcast, so it will be archived on the Harris Center website. So if you ever want to go back and look and see and reference some material, that is certainly an option. And if there's anyone that needed to connect with, you can reach out to the Harris Center and we'll help make those connections as well. So thank you very much.
Can I just say thanks to the audience for listening to me, because I know a lot of people here have been listening to me all week. So thanks once again for doing that. And I would just like to thank Kathy and her team for facilitating this. It's been a great forum for getting word out about the Northern Periphery and Arctic program. So thank you